me away. There was nothing else quite like it. I had never seen or tasted food quite like this before. It was deeply inspired and grounded in the market, as well as Indian ingredients, which are often overlooked and not talked about or celebrated. Um, and there were all these different flavors and tastes and textures presented in these stunning ways. And some of these dishes just blew me away and remained with me forever. There's that hung yogurt dish, which I'm not really a yogurt person at all, but I couldn't believe how good it was. And the amazing thing was this young chef, Thomas Zacharias, was standing by our table and talking with great passion about ingredients that have been gleaned from the mangroves and so on and so forth. And over the last 7 years, it was very clear that something new had happened in Indian food already. And over the last 7 years, it has been like a kind of a meteoric rise for Bombay Canteen. Very rightly, I'm on that jury, but I can't take credit for it. One of many on the jury. Bombay Canteen eventually was acknowledged as the best restaurant in India by the Condé Nast Traveler list, and I think legitimately it has pushed the boundaries for Indian food. And though it is a partnership, and of course Floyd's not here with us anymore, Thomas is a big part of it. So first of all, please, a big welcome to Thomas Zacharias. Thomas, you're an inspiration, and we hear a lot about the Goa restaurant revolution. I know that you had a beginning, a lot to do with the way these people think about food. I also want to say that we've been talking a lot about pandemic times in this festival, as we must. We're still in a pandemic situation, and of course, a year ago, we were all in lockdown. And I think roughly about that time, Thomas started something quite new, and my son, who is a keen food person, and my whole family started to watch Thomas making these amazing videos in his kitchen about different kinds of dishes that he was inspired by and wanted to present, and made it very accessible. We, in fact, have tried at least one or two of those dishes, and they're amazing. I must ask you who that person Cicely is that keeps on passing wisecracks about Thomas' work. Maybe we'll get to that. But in keeping with the times that we're in the times of reinvention, finding new ideas, new ways of rooting ourselves, Thomas has started a new venture which immediately looks very exciting. I haven't had really the ability to go through it and read every word in it as I normally like to do, but something called the Locavore, which is really, really interesting. I think adds a huge new dimension to the way we think about food in India. I'm looking forward to hearing about that. Thomas actually has a presentation, but it appears that, okay, let's see whether it can happen. Thomas, please respond in a way, if you like. Thank you.
Check. Thank you all for being here. I'm hoping that we can resolve this because a lot of this is visual. But while we are waiting to do that, firstly, thank you, Vivek, for having me here. It's really an honor to be in the midst of all of you and around so many dignitaries and experts and visionaries. Before we start my kind of presentation, I want to do a fun little experiment with you. You'll all need to pull out your phones, open your browsers, and go to a website called menti.com, menti.com. Once you go onto that website, click on menti.com. You'll get a prompt for a number, for a code. That code is Has everybody got a prompt for a code? Okay. The code is 68727735. 68727735. Anybody needs it again? The website is menti.com, menti.com, and the code is 68727735. Okay, so now you're all presented with a very simple question, which is name the vegetables you've cooked or eaten at home this past month. You don't have to name all of them. You can just, no, you can, after you name one vegetable, just press enter and you can keep adding as we go. There's a lot of responses coming in. Wow, that's a lot of vegetables. It's a good way to kill time while we're still figuring it out. Sure. If you say so, Jerry. Good one. Are you doing it as well? Are you running out of vegetables? Yeah, yeah, yeah. How are we looking? Everybody's almost done? Okay, I have one more question, so I think we should move on to the next question. Did you get a prompt for changing the question? Okay, so the new question is, name a local vegetable you loved to eat as a kid but hardly see cooked or eaten anymore. Hold on. The code is 68727735. Some of you have already been putting it in, okay. you off with. To kind of talk to you about how I got to this point of asking these questions, very quickly I'll run through this interesting ways. And because my experience in Indian food was very limited, it was limited through most of my childhood to Kerala cuisine and the food you get in Indian restaurants, which is butter chicken, palak paneer, and dal makhani. I had to learn and teach myself. And so I found travel to be the most effective way of doing that. Over the course of the past 7 years, I've now traveled to 23 states in the country for food exploration. And again, every time I travel, even today, I'm blown away by what I see. I'm blown away by the techniques, the ingredients, the stories, the recipes, and over the years, I've also started realizing that kind of got me thinking to make certain observations in that period of time. One, we know very little about where our food comes from, who's growing it, the efforts that are going into how our food is grown. We've been completely disconnected from the source of our I think the net isn't connected on this laptop. Sorry, we're still going through some technical difficulty. Okay, wait. Oh, the rest of the photographs haven't. Is he still here? Can I get some technical help, please? Okay. A lot of our local ingredients are vanishing. I've seen this, especially when I've gone to the villages in the country, interacted with local communities, tribal communities, who there's a homogenization of our food culture that's happening around the country. That is actually something I saw at a very nascent stage of what I'm trying to do. Is a starting point, at least for me, to try and change that. Now, the dictionary defines a locavore as a person whose diet consists of only locally grown or produced food. But we've extended that to say is also curious about where our food comes from, how it's grown, who grows it, and is conscious of the impact of thing. But we've also kind of worked with certain organizations like Black Bazaar Coffee, which is a coffee company that works with local smallholder farmers in Karnataka, Kerala, and Tamil Nadu. And we've worked with them on taking on a very ambitious project, which is the byproducts of coffee. So what you see in the bottom left is cascara, which is the dried coffee pulp, or the skin, which is otherwise thrown away. It takes up a lot of resources to store and discard, which actually makes for a fantastic tea. Around the world, this product is just thrown away. And it makes for a great cocktail as well. If you brew it, chill it with gin and tonic, it's amazing. And on the top left is the ground version, which is coffee flour, which can again be supplemented or substituted in recipes, especially baking recipes, and also different types of breads. On the right, we're working with a company called Eat With Better that's trying to make jackfruit more accessible. The statistics I've read are that 2,000 crores worth of jackfruits gets wasted in India every year. And there's an ingredient which is spread across the country. It sustained a lot of local communities for many decades back in the day, but today is even people in rural parts of the country are shying away from it. So that's another initiative. We also highlight the work of regional Indian food experiences and events that are happening around the country, people who are doing pop-ups, who are doing talks around the country. We try and highlight and talk about chefs like Avinash Martins, who's doing his own part in supporting and encouraging local. There's obviously recipes. It's a food platform after all. So recipes which we are sourcing from across the country to document, but also get people to uh, cook more regional Indian food. I think Vivek had made a mention of my cooking videos, and I think the realization for me was that if we make some of these recipes more accessible, more approachable, we can really drive people to cook more. And I think for anybody sitting here listening in, I think the first step is to acknowledge the problems that exist. Try and inform yourself. We're starting to live in a very cruel world, so be kinder and more respectful and more accepting of other cuisines, of other cultures, of other people and other communities. Support through actual action. So whether that means through switching out where you're buying your food from, or through the clicks and the shares that you do on social media, all those little things actually make a difference. Rally up your own community, and this could be people in your own home, it could be people in your building, it could be people in your city, but get people around for one of these causes and try and do and start somewhere, but find some joy in the process. I think we all get intimidated and find a lot of this very daunting, but take little steps and start somewhere, and hopefully that scary future of monotonous, boring future of food might be saved. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Thomas. Please check out the Locavore, it's excellent. I wanted to ask you quickly a question. There's a lot of triumphalism currently in Goa right now about, I think you actually said it was the hottest destination yesterday or something like that, because Jack Sukhija quoted you. Was it you who said that? No, okay, thankfully. But tell me, what do you feel about this hype as we come out of the pandemic that Goa is some kind of like food mecca?
I think, are you referring to the new wave of restaurants and things
yes,
like that?
there's a lot of like kind of perception that you have to be in Goa. A lot of people are moving to Goa. They're creating all kinds of new restaurants. They're very ambitious kind of new restaurants opening in Goa. And I'm continually hearing that, you know, you live in a state where it's the most exciting food destination. In South Asia, someone said me yesterday. What do you think of this?
I think the excitement for me is muddled by the fact that very little of that is centered around local food culture. Very little is being done to actually focus on ingredients, on techniques, on traditions that are rooted here. I mean, you can literally count in one hand how many new age restaurants are actually paying homage to the cuisine. So for me, that is disappointing. I do think there's a lot of buzz around what's happening in the F&B scene in Goa, but it's dangerous territory, because it'll just become a national destination for just good food in general, as opposed to being a national destination for great Goan food.
Yes, I have been thinking in those terms actually, like Las Vegas, right? Las Vegas is city in the desert, but somehow it's got this reputation for being the place, for instance, where you can eat some of the best Chinese food in the world. You're supposed to go to Las Vegas for, and it seems a bit like that. I mean, now I'm hearing, you know, that
the best Japanese food in India might be in Goa very soon.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, Izumi is a perfect example. I'm a big fan of Izumi. Again, on that same list, I voted for it. It's number 3 in the country. They've just opened in Goa. The restaurant's much better than the one in Bandra. Like in Bandra, you have to sit down and they shuttle you in and out. And as you must in a small place here, it's very expansive. It's under a tree. I don't know if you've been there. It's very lovely. You're eating this impeccable Japanese food. But I know and I personally am a big fan of it. I liked it very much. But there is a question. People have said to me, this says nothing about Goa. It says nothing about Goan food. It says it's just that now you've got a swankier Japanese restaurant in Goa. The swankiest Japanese restaurant in India is in Goa.
Yeah, and I think my personal qualm is actually with the F&B industry and chefs in particular, because I mean, we've always been fantasizing about Western or Asian cuisines and ingredients, but there's so much richness in the food here. There's enough to create hundreds of unique restaurants inspired by our own food, by our own cuisine, by our own culture. And it's sad that there's only a handful of people actually pushing the boundaries when it comes to that. And I think Chef Avinash Martin is a great example, and I was really lucky to have eaten there 6 months ago. But we need more restaurants that pay homage and do that. I'm not saying that we should all be eating just Goan food, but right now the balance is way off.
Let's take a question from the audience. Sure. Would you mind standing up and speaking loudly?
That's usually the argument, but I think the success of a restaurant like the Bombay Canteen counters that argument. I think you can still make Indian food. Sorry, the question was that if people are going to be, if the audience or the customer is going to ask for non-Indian food, how does somebody in the FME industry kind of challenge that? And what I was saying is that that argument is a little weak because you do have examples of restaurants that are trying to make a difference, pushing the boundaries, that have been successful.
Jack?
Yeah. So, and I'm a big supporter of local food, whatever, but just to play a devil's advocate, because of the cuisine you get in Goa, at least I would never have eaten Burmese food if a Bomra had not come here, or I probably would not have eaten Japanese food if someone like an Izumi came here, whatever. So I think it's great that there is this cultural blend coming in, and the point which Vivek said I made was, I think Vikram Doctor said it yesterday, that it's great all these restaurants are coming here, but the local local vendor base is not being developed. All the products are coming from outside. So I think if somehow someone can develop the vendor base, which is green, which comes from food grown locally, it would be fantastic.
Absolutely, and it's not just what is happening in like places like Maharashtra with the restaurants and the kinds of restaurants that open. Scarily is that the kind of produce that is being grown to feed these restaurants is not Indian. But what I'm trying to say is that it's not that like one exists at the cost of the other. The Bomras of the world and the Izumis of the world still need to exist. I'm saying that there's no counter to that. There's no one on the other side actually trying to make a difference with local food.
Is that the nature of the restaurant business, actually, Thomas? I'm wondering, because we do have this phenomenon of Gaunty vegetables, for instance, in the market, right? And they are sold early, and they're priced, and they command a higher price, and they sell out quite early, actually. So people are definitely using and priding themselves on using these local ingredients at home. But when they go out, perhaps they want to try something that's a little more exotic, which could mean butter chicken. Is that part of the restaurant experience?
I think only, I mean, from what I've experienced and seen around the country, I think it's only a microcosm that's actually cooking and eating those local vegetables. I don't see the same excitement that people have for asparagus and truffles as they have for any other vegetable that I'd spoken about. In fact, most people don't even know it exists. I wish I could show you that slide of what all of you have been eating this last month, but like I said, it's mostly like 10, 12 different vegetables, and I've gone to different crowds and I've done this exercise, and usually the extent of produce that we're eating in India today is not more than like two dozen different vegetables. I tried this experiment for myself where at the Bombay Canteen I restricted myself to indigenous produce, and through the course of 6 years I think we featured over 150 vegetables alone, not including fruits, grains, other ingredients. So I think it is a factor of restaurants. It's a factor of homes. I think it's a far more complex problem than just blaming restaurants, but it is a problem. Yes.
Congrats, Thomas. Very good presentation. My name is Rahul. My question is, in your travels across India, have you come across more people like Chef Avinash Martins who are using local produce and showcasing local cuisine?
Very few. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Typically, when I've traveled, there's people are almost ashamed of local food. People are almost ashamed of their local ingredients, and I think a large part of that comes from this aspirational quality we assign to things that are outside of us, that are foreign. But it's come to a point of shame almost, especially and the more rural you go, like I've gone to villages in Maharashtra, in Palghar district, where even people who survived on wild foods for like generations and generations are now leaving all of that because of this aspirational level to it. So to answer your question, I mean, very few. I think part of it also, if you're talking about like chefs in restaurants, we've been conditioned in our colleges, in our institutions, through social media, through different forms of media, that all these cuisines abroad are far superior. So that level of conditioning needs to be kind of reversed in a way. And also, it's a lot of that information about other cuisines is very accessible. We don't have a lot of it documented in India, so it's a little harder. You have to actually, like I did, maybe travel. But even if you start in your own kind of neighborhood and your own surroundings, that's a start. But it requires a little more effort than picking up a recipe book or being taught in a culinary school. Thank you.
Thomas, question up here from Rakshanda Jalil.
Would you say there's a certain snobbishness to ingredients and sourcing ingredients? For instance, I went down to the market here, the vegetable market yesterday, and I found avocados being sold for 350 rupees, which coming from Delhi is unheard of. One piece costs 350 for us, there. I'm quite happy buying and using and I'm a home style cook. I mean, I don't know anything about restaurant cooking. But I realize there's a difference in taste, but it's okay to use a locally sourced avocado. But a restaurant chef would sort of turn up their nose at that. What do you make of that?
No, absolutely, and I see it happening all the time. And I think we live in a time when chefs and restaurants are driving food trends, coupled with maybe social media. So a large part of the responsibility now falls on us to actually be bold with how we're presenting and sharing our voice and our thoughts on food, because it is actually influencing. If you see suddenly chefs in Goa stop using avocado and try and find a replacement. I saw a chef who I know who's from Goa share a recipe for a Loki guacamole, which I know might sound off-putting to a lot of people, but yeah. But like at least like try to do something around it. Right now we're very complacent, and that's the problem. Hi.
1 second.
There is, yeah. Hi, I'm Oliver, chef, and so there is this trend now of, regional food and making regional food cool, and you have a lot of chefs who do that. But do you see some kind of something that could go wrong? Because a lot of them are taking traditional food and trying to make it cool, contemporizing them, etc. And over a period of time, do you feel that what that particular traditional food is could get distorted, and someone who's got the loudest voice on social media could like misinterpret what something traditionally was or tasted like?
Yeah, and that is, I mean, that is a factor. I mean, I'm part of that movement that you speak of myself, so I'm very conscious of it. And I think one, it starts with intent, and what is the intent behind what this chef or this restaurant is trying to do. But more importantly, it's there has to be some onus to bring in some element of storytelling around it, and kind of respect the traditions that you took inspiration from. And that is, I think, what a lot of the dangerous part of what that cool regional Indian food trend has happened is that people took that at face value, very similar to what how people got inspired by a chef like Ferran Adria, where molecular gastronomy became a thing, and they completely lost the point of what he was trying to do. And the danger is that people do that, and that is in fact happening, and that's why a little more nuanced storytelling needs to go hand in hand if someone's attempting to do that.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Chef, what about the pandemic? This thing about eating local and the supply chain, it seemed a bit moot in the pandemic. I mean, we had a very, in the world's strictest lockdown, as it was called in India, Goa had a particularly strict one. We were not able to move from village to village. We were not able to go on the roads. People who did not live very close to someone who had vegetables were basically stranded for days until appeals were made. Quite interestingly, one of the interesting things that happened there, we tend to live in a kind of stratified and siloed society, but the people who immediately suffer the most are the newcomers to Goa, who do not have networks in their villages. They may be wealthy, they may be living, you know, in very posh localities. I know one or two celebrities who suddenly, after 3 days, there was nothing in the refrigerator, and they are the ones actually who appealed directly to the Prime Minister's office so that some supplies were restored within Goa. What is this thing about eating local? I mean, isn't it now? Aren't we like? Isn't that what the only agenda has to be?
Yeah. So I think, in a way, the pandemic has kind of given us a little kick in the backside. It has woken us up to, at least very briefly, some of us have already gone back to sleep, but it has brought to light this realization that you do have to think about where your next meal is going to come from, and it's important to consider that. And I think all of us were kind of forced to, I mean, a lot of us who probably haven't cooked before took on the reins of feeding ourselves or each other. So I think there is a spark that came from that, which is what I'm kind of trying to leverage a movement like the Locavore on. But it's very easy to fall back into 10-minute food deliveries. So it's a tricky situation. But I completely resonate with what you're saying.
I do agree. It was quite a phenomenon in the early part of the pandemic when we were all kind of, when there still was no COVID actually in our country, or not much. That was a huge thing about congratulating men for getting into the kitchen for the first time, right? There was everyone patting each other on the back. I made bread, you know, I peeled a banana, and so on and so forth. But in that movement, Chef Thomas demystified, made it easy for us to do all kinds of amazing food, which I did. And I urge you all to, sorry for the technical delays, I urge you all to take the opportunity to follow the Locavore, follow Thomas's work. He is definitely the future of food in India is in better hands because Thomas is doing his work. Huge congratulations, Thomas. Thank you so much for coming to inaugurate the Liberty and Light Festival. You are one of the, I mean this very sincerely, the fact that you are here means our event is a success. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much for having me.